my wife Emily always had a way of making me feel like I was invisible in my own home. Not intentionally, at least not at first. It started with small things, her laughter that didn't reach me, the way she'd glance over my shoulder when I spoke, the subtle sigh whenever I asked a question. But tonight, she crossed a line I hadn't expected. She had called me earlier that evening, her voice light and casual, as if nothing between us had shifted in months. But the moment she mentioned a friend on the line, I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. "It's just a friend," she said quickly, like she was rehearsing the excuse in her head. "She wants to talk, nothing serious." I nodded, pretending I was calm. But when her phone rang again later, she handed it to me without looking me in the eye. "Go ahead," she muttered. "It's just a friend." I picked it up, and suddenly everything changed. A soft voice answered on the other end, hesitant but warm. "Hello?" I didn't hesitate. "Hello, dear. How are you?" I said, my tone casually calm, like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The line went silent for a moment, and then I heard her. Not my wife, but her friend. The woman on the other end froze, as if she hadn't expected this, hadn't imagined anyone would answer with that kind of familiarity. Emily, standing just a few feet away, turned pale. Her eyes went wide, her lips parting as if she were about to say something. But no sound came out. She hadn't expected me to take the call. She hadn't expected me to speak first. I could hear her friend inhale sharply, a subtle hitch in her voice. I just wanted to ask how Emily is doing," she said. I smiled a small, deliberate smile. "And how are you doing, dear? It's been a while since we last spoke." There was another pause, and in that silence, the truth began to press itself into the room like a heavy weight. Emily's hand hovered over the phone as if she could snatch it back, but she didn't. She was stunned, caught between fear and curiosity, between pride and panic. I stayed calm. I kept the tone light, almost cheerful. But inside, I was cataloging everything. Every hesitation, every carefully measured pause, every small inflection that betrayed what had really been going on. I realized then that the game she thought she was playing had just shifted. And for once, I was the one holding the power. The line on the phone was quiet for a moment longer. I could sense her friend struggling to regain composure, like she had just realized she was speaking to someone who saw more than she'd anticipated. I just wanted to make sure she's okay," the voice stammered. I chuckled softly, keeping my voice calm and controlled. "Oh, she's fine. But I imagine she's not as free to talk to friends as she used to be." A click, a small intake of breath on the other side, and I could hear the tension radiating through the speaker. Emily, standing next to me, didn't move. She was frozen, her hands still hovering over the counter. Her eyes betrayed a mix of shock, fear, and irritation. The careful composure she always wore was cracking in slow, almost imperceptible lines. Her friend finally found her words again. "Well, I didn't mean to overstep. I just wanted to check in." I smiled faintly. "Of course. You're always welcome to check in. But you must understand some things are private, and it's best to speak openly rather than in whispers behind closed doors." Another pause. I could hear her friend adjusting, realizing the shift in control. Every word I spoke reminded her that I wasn't intimidated, that I wasn't reacting the way my wife would have expected. Emily's lips parted, and for the first time, she didn't have an answer. She opened her mouth, hesitated, and then simply pressed her hand against the counter. Her face was a mask of disbelief. She hadn't predicted that I would speak directly, calmly, confidently. "You," she whispered, but her voice trailed off. I kept the conversation light, almost teasing, but my calmness carried weight. "Yes, I'm speaking directly because someone has to know what's real and what's been hidden." Her friend inhaled sharply. The tension was thick in the line. I could hear it even through the small speaker. I realized then that the phone wasn't just a device. It was a window into everything Emily had assumed she could control. And suddenly the stakes had shifted. Emily had thought this was her moment to manipulate, to orchestrate some carefully planned encounter, some subtle power play. But instead, I had quietly taken the reins without anger, without shouting, without losing my composure. Her face told me she understood the rules had changed. And I knew in that instant that the rest of the night would unfold very differently from anything she had imagined. Her friend's voice came again, softer this time, almost hesitant. I didn't realize. I didn't know you'd..." I cut in gently. "It's fine. No need to apologize. But I think it's important you understand something. I notice things. I pay attention. And I don't react the way you or Emily expect me to." There was a pause so long it felt like the room had stopped spinning. Emily's hand dropped from the counter and she leaned against the wall, silent, frozen. Her wide eyes flicked between me and the phone, as if trying to find a loophole, a way to regain control. But the calm in my voice, the steady presence, made it clear. There was no room for her usual games tonight. Finally, her friend whispered, I understand." I smiled, warm but firm. "Good. That's all I needed." Emily's mouth opened again, but I shook my head slightly. "No, this isn't about you, Olivia. Not right now. It's about honesty. And tonight, I'm standing on my own truth." Her shoulders slumped slightly, a subtle shift that told me more than words ever could. For months, she had assumed she could push boundaries, test limits, and I would bend. But tonight, the dynamic had changed. She had assumed fear or desperation, but instead, she found calm, clarity, and quiet authority. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time in years. Something inside her shifted, a flicker of recognition that the man she thought she could manipulate wasn't there anymore. Not fully. I handed the phone back with a measured, deliberate calm. "You can go now. Emily doesn't need to be reminded of what's real. She needs to see it for herself." Her friend hesitated, then nodded, a mix of relief and awe in her tone. "Thank you for being honest." As the line clicked off, Emily's head lowered. She didn't move to protest or argue. She didn't ask questions. She simply stood there, quiet, like the air itself had changed around her. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't in months. Control, clarity, and the kind of calm that comes not from winning, but from knowing exactly who you are and refusing to let anyone make you small. Emily finally lifted her gaze and her eyes met mine. No words, no excuses, just acknowledgement. I smiled faintly. "Good night," I said calmly and turned away, letting her process what had just happened. Tonight the game had shifted, and for once I wasn't playing by her rules.